Alright, greetings family. How y'all doing? Y'all come on through. This is an important topic today for our people. So y'all get it. Tune in, y'all share the show.
Yeah, invite some of your friends.
Invite some people. We don't need this one.
No. We don't. Scroll down, it should be there. Let me get right here. It's not going to do that. What is it? Refresh?
Yeah.
It should be popping up here. All right. Good evening and welcome to the True Love Movement. I was your host, Brother Shaq.
And Mama Fire.
We'd like to welcome everyone here to this lovely, lovely October 28th, 2017 here in New Orleans.
Yeah, like my grandmother says, gorgeous.
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 Beautiful weather out there. No heat, no AC weather for the moment. We loving that. So many things happening here in the city of New Orleans. And so we are really honored that you all have chosen to ride with us here on today. So we apologize, a little technical difficulty delay, but I think we're going to get it going, Mama Fi. How was your self-care Saturday? What's happening?
Very beautiful. You know, just right in line with the beautiful, lovely day it is, the nice little cool weather. So I had an opportunity to support my daughter today with the dance classes over at Terrorism.
Right.
They're preparing for a performance that's happening on Thursday.
Okay.
And then she had a very special class today led by Manahem Laurent.
Okay.
And it was African, Haitian dance. And
Okay.
it just, I mean, I was sweating like I haven't sweat in a long time.
Right.
So I sweat all the time, but this was like getting it in.
Right,
and so it's
right.
really beautiful. A lot of sisterhood. You know, he did a move where the sisters had to look each other in the eye. You know, part of the dance was looking at each other in the eye. And that's hard to do.
Yeah.
I found, you know, in observing with my partner, you know, she's my sister, so we enjoyed looking in each other's eyes and laughing.
Right.
But what I observed while the other sisters were doing it is that it was really hard. Uncomfortable. And so that was indicated to me that we got a lot of work to do on sisterhood. We got a lot of work to do on intimacy. You know, sometimes, you know, intimacy don't have to deal with being sexually attracted to one another.
Right,
it could be,
right.
you know, about hugging or being close or, you know, vulnerable and authentic and looking at each other in the eye.
Right.
You know, it's not a nasty thing or a bad thing. You know, it don't have to be between a male and female kind of thing. It's breaking the barriers between any type of line between you and your sister. There's no difference. You know, we all in the same boat. We all got the same gifts and talents. We all got this beautiful shine and just congratulating and loving, you know, loving on one another. So that was a beautiful experience. And then just hanging with my baby girl today, you know, with the weather change, there's some things that, you know, we need to make sure we have. And so hanging with her and now I'm here on the True Love Movement Hour. I always look forward to Saturday evenings to, you know, for the political education component that we give our people every Saturday.
That's right.
So thank y'all for tuning in as usual.
Definitely. You can join us here live in the studio if you like True Love Movement on Facebook. You can catch us here live in the studio. Also, of course, on WBOK1230m.com on the web, the WBOK1230m app, and the good old-fashioned way on your AM dial, 1230 AM. WBOK is coming through live right here, right now. I'm fine. So, without any further ado, we do have a really big topic today, as we always do, a jam-packed show, jam-packed hour. Political education, as you mentioned. And we're going to dive right in and dig in to make sure we can catch our callers if they are so inclined, and give you an opportunity too to share this show with those that you respect. We're rounding out the end of our fourth year here on WBOK 1230. We're going to talk for real times. True Love Movement out, intending to continue to bring you a show that black folks can be proud of, Mama Fire.
That's right. And we're going to really celebrate for our 4th year anniversary here on WBOK. So y'all stay tuned for our celebrations.
Definitely.
For the whole month of November.
That's right, which is coming up. We on the heels of November, Mama Fire.
We sure are.
So without any further ado, today's topic is domestic terrorism. Again, today's topic is domestic terrorism. If you remember, not long ago, we did the segment on the BIE and what is the Black Identity Extremist, as a new term that was floating around. But today is a little bit different, even though it's got that same kind of backdrop. Today is a little bit different, Mama Fire. And I'd like to start off with the old-fashioned way, like we used to do, just to make sure we're all on the same page here. In defining the terms of what we're talking about. And so when I looked up domestic, Mama Fire, we know domestic terrorism is 2 words. So I looked up domestic, and it's defined as of relating to or originating within a country, and especially one's own country. It's also of or relating to the household or the family. And it is indigenous, for example, a domestic species. And so that's what domestic is defined. The word terrorism is defined as the systematic use of violent or destructive acts, such as a bombing, committed by groups or individuals in order to intimidate individuals or a population or government into granting their demands, especially as a means of coercion. So that domestic and terrorism broken down are 2 separate words in English, and those were the definitions when you look those up. Now, the Patriot Act, we talked a little bit about the Patriot Act when we did the BIE show. The Patriot Act defines or redefines it this way. Domestic terrorism is defined as when a person engages in domestic terrorism if they do an act dangerous to human life that is a violation of the criminal laws of a state or the United States, if the act appears to be intended to, number 1, intimidate or coerce a civilian population, influence the policy of a government by intimidation or coercion, or to affect the conduct of a government by mass destruction, assassination, or kidnapping. Additionally, the acts have to occur primarily within the territorial jurisdiction of the United States, and if they do not, may be regarded as international terrorism. And so those are the definitions out there of domestic terrorism. And one of the things that frustrates me, Mama Fly, about English is that, those were, though they were similar, they were not quite exactly the same thing. So when we talk about domestic terrorism, we're not necessarily talking about the very same definition, at least as far as the people are concerned, as far as people understand. And so I really feel like that's a deliberate, done deliberately and meant to confuse us.
Definitely.
And so we're looking at those words. We already talked about the violence and what have you, Mama Five, but what is domestic violence? We got domestic terrorism, but what is domestic violence, and is that different?
Well, I think, we're going to have a paradigm shift on this show today, and it's not anything we haven't talked about before, but October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month.
That's right.
And it's important for us to talk about this as a people and really understand it. But then there's a metaphor that Brother Shaq uses all the time that we'll bring in as well. But if we get a good idea, a good understanding of domestic violence, I think we have a better understanding of the metaphor. And so my experience with domestic violence is I'm a survivor, for one, of domestic violence. 2, after my internship, was served at a domestic violence and sexual abuse counseling center. And so I got a lot of experience teaching these classes on what domestic violence is. It was a 6-week program for women who were a part of the shelter. And so I had to teach it over and over and over and over for a year. Wow. And so I really understand domestic violence as it relates to women for sure, but we also had some men as well as some queer or non-binary or whatever they call the gender roles as well. As far as domestic violence, domestic violence doesn't have any especially relationship to any particular gender,
right.
Even though we are heavy on understanding it from the battered woman point of view. And so you can go ahead and read that definition that you have, Brother Shay.
Well, no, I mean, I looked that up too, because just, this is what's out there. And so if we're going to talk about something, we got to make sure that we're all like on the same page. Not that we're defining it, is we're just taking what's already out there and trying to make sense of it and see how it applies.
That's right.
Now, what I read previously was from the Patriot Act, so that's the government. The government defined or redefined what domestic terrorism is. So here the government is also, this is also from the government, directly from the government site, on what is domestic violence. And the government says, we define domestic violence as a pattern of abusive behavior in any relationship that is used by one partner to gain or maintain power and control over another intimate partner. Domestic violence can be physical, sexual, emotional, economic, or psychological actions or threats of actions that influence another person. This includes any behaviors that intimidate, manipulate, humiliate, isolate, frighten, terrorize, coerce, threaten, blame, hurt, injure, or wound someone. So the government there is defining domestic violence. And it sounded very, very close to what they said domestic terrorism was, Mama Fire. By definition, not my own and not my interpretation, but actually reading. So, but they're still a little bit different. And so why are these different? Or are they? Why are the definitions that the government is putting out there different? Or really, are they in fact different?
It doesn't sound or feel very different. But let me just say that domestic, quote unquote, violence is intimate partner violence between two people who are choosing to be in an intimate relationship. That is usually a sexual relationship or a partnership, wife and husband, quote unquote, wife and husband, or girlfriend and boyfriend, or same-sex relationships or whatever. So that is the only thing that makes it different.
Well, see, that's where I think the confusion comes in, though, Mount Fire, because it essentially is the same kind of thing. But when you, like you're saying, well, if they're intimate partners or what have you, I mean, you're violating somebody. It's got all the same. It's got all the same mechanics. But you mentioned it earlier when you said that typically when we talk about domestic violence, it sounds like it's a woman's thing, or a woman's, she's being abused, a woman's being beat up when you talk about domestic violence. But when you're talking about domestic terrorism, it sounds very big and broad, and it has to do with, dare I say, not that I say, but when many of our people like to talk about our country, like talking about a domestic terrorist or a domestic act of terrorism, some kind of act of terrorism that's happening on U.S. soil. And that's a large deal. But when we think about or talk about domestic violence, that's something that's happening with women. You know what I'm saying? That's it's a small thing, it's an insignificant thing, but yet the definitions are very, very, very similar. And I mean, really, as far as I'm concerned, they are the same, because if you replace where it says intimate partner with country, you have the same action taking place, Mama Fire.
And I think you say it sounds small because we're talking about quote unquote battered women here.
Correct.
But that talks about patriarchy.
Correct.
That makes us understand that patriarchy is a big part of why domestic violence isn't taken seriously. I mean, listen, we saw some statistics just on Monday.
That's
I
right.
was a part of a panel on domestic violence and the hypersexuality of women on Monday at Loyola. There was the Love organization, LOVE organization, does these every so often, panel discussions.
Right.
And thank you for, I'm honored to be a part of something like that. But I think they said there were 3,000 plus cases of domestic violence, and only 9 of them had someone indicted or something.
Wow, that was in the state of Louisiana.
In the state of Louisiana.
3,000.
3,678, something like that.
Yeah, conviction maybe.
Conviction, right?
Yeah, it was
conviction.
Okay.
And only 9 were convicted of it.
Wow.
So this is, I mean, how many of us know people that have died at the hands of domestic violence, were killed, or murdered at the hand of domestic violence. I mean, we always hear these stories. So this is much more rampant, I would say, than any other, as far as domestic terrorism on the other side that they are saying, right? Is that what we're talking about there?
Yeah. I think it's the misidentification of what it is, and I'm only bringing up identification because, I guess as of late, and it's maybe been on the rise in the last couple of years. I know you and I are still struggling to learn the language, so I'm not going to pretend that we know all of the different ways in which people are identifying themselves and identifying other people and using various pronouns and all these different kinds of ideas.
Right.
Why isn't the scope of understanding domestic terrorism or domestic violence keeping pace with that? You know what I'm saying? Because it's as far as what I can read, not my opinion, but what I can read, domestic terrorism reads just like domestic violence in terms of action, but yet there's this large distinction. And I think mainly because when you talk about domestic terrorism, it sounds so, it's really a distant or a sanitized or dehumanized kind of term, It's like when there's a domestic thing that happens and thousands of people are killed, that's just so big. I mean, you don't even think about those are actually individual people who have families, and you don't see that. It's just a death toll. But domestic violence, because it seems like it's a smaller thing that only happens to women, it's as if that's not domestic terrorism at all. That's something else, and I want to know how. I want to know how that's actually different.
Well, I know it starts with America being one of the most violent, countries in the world. If that's what it seems like to me.
Definitely.
Someone who has resided here my whole life, and just they try to say that it's two different things, and it really is. I mean, it's like it's two different things and it's the same thing, like any dichotomy. But yeah, I mean, I think I'm not really 100% sure where we've gone with the domestic terrorism. Are we talking about the terrorism that we have to endure as people who live on this soil, or are we talking about what happened in Vegas?
Well, we're talking about the reality of domestic violence and how it is part of the culture, and violence is part of the culture of America, and I guess the overshadowing of the severity of and the ramifications of domestic or intimate partner violence, and how we really don't mess with that too much, and if we do, we kind of relegate it to the thing that happens with women or what have you. And because of patriarchy, as you mentioned, it doesn't really get a big light, and it doesn't really get placed in it's just part of what it is. In other words, it's not really a thing, but domestic terrorism would be a problem, where domestic violence is just a reality that we tend to live with.
And, our people are, we're broken and we're hurt and angry and enraged. And so if we could just take 1 second and go into the microcosm of intimate partner violence for us, and that, patriarchy and black man being co-opted into patriarchy, and how, most of the time it is the black man doing this to black women and also black children. And I'm not sure. So the name of the show is Domestic Terrorism. And in my mind, I thought we were doing like the metaphor between domestic violence, as far as what the victim, quote unquote victim, has to go through as far as the cycle of abuse and how to prepare to leave and the dangers of leaving and those kind of things, as well as kind of like the black sit phenomenon of us, the metaphor of, that's what I thought.
Right, and that is absolutely correct. Let's look at,
because I'm a little confused.
Let's look at the physical abuse aspects of domestic violence: hitting, slapping, shoving, grabbing, pinching, biting, hair pulling, all types of physical abuse. Type of abuse also includes denying a partner medical care, forcing alcohol and or drugs upon him or her. So as we were talking, you were talking larger about our experience for the black experience here in America. I think we've had that. I think that's happened to our people,
Right. So can we talk about the metaphor?
Absolutely.
Yeah, because it just seemed a little off to me. The metaphor of, you know, we didn't state that yet.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So there's, you know, Brother Shaq always talks about a metaphor of you know, the abuse that we have taken as black people in this country.
That's right.
And so it's like we are the quote unquote battered woman, or has the battered woman syndrome. And America is the big bad, you know, perpetrator, or the big bad abuser.
Right.
And so we're trying to show how the actual cycle of abuse is very similar in both cases. It's the same in both cases, where, you know, the quote unquote battered woman thinks that you know, this is the only place for them to go. That they have many barriers for them to actually leave the abuser. And so I don't know if we ever stated that. That's why I was a
Not today, but yeah, please.
Yeah, and so yeah, that's it.
Yeah, and so I guess that is it that our black life, our black experience has looked like that of a battered woman in America since our relationship began here, at least under the terms of this nation in the 1600s, wildfire. You know, I mean, I know of course our people were already here, but I'm talking about as far as non-white people are concerned, indigenous people here to this land. Has it not been like that? You know, has history not shown us that it's been violent? First of all, we were kidnapped, and I remember reading something in the terrorism thing about kidnapping.
Yes, it did.
We were kidnapped, we were brought here, and so this whole time we have been abused. You know, in this relationship, this unfortunate codependent relationship we found ourselves in.
Yeah, and totally trapped in a cycle of abuse. And so the cycle of abuse for the domestic violence, intimate partner violence, is there is a honeymoon period. You know, there's a honeymoon period where everything is okay, and then there's some tension building, and then there's an explosion. So explosion, honeymoon, tension building, explosion, honeymoon, tension building. And so if we would look at that as quote unquote civilians of, you know, I mean, I don't even want to say it, but in this abusive relationship, in this abusive country, we, you know, it's like sometimes it seems like everything is all good, you know, especially during times of the holiday season. You know, it's holiday season, everybody's got Christmas lights up, and everybody's feeling the spirit and buying everything, and like buying way too much, and it seems like everything is good. And then tension building could happen at any time. It's always happening. There's always a tense relationship between, you know, ourselves and the quote unquote systems, you know, that we are under. We feel like we are under. And then explosion. Something happens. Something major happens. Police kills one of our little brothers or little sisters, or, you know, is terrorizing someone, and then it's an explosion. And we go right back into the cycle, instead of saying, why are we here? Why do we continue to do the same things when we know that we will never get justice, when we know that we will never be healthy and whole and safe in this environment? And so it's very similar to the cycle of abuse.
Right. I think what you just described could very well be describing, you know, the centuries we've been here.
Yeah.
And so why do you think, after all we have experienced historically, that I guess collectively we're in denial about what this really is that we're in, Mount Fire? Professional opinion on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think denial is a huge component of abuse in any way. Because to say that I'm being abused is to say that I'm, you know, a fool or stupid, or, you know, have some type of control. Like, abuse is all about power and control, you know, and you know, I said it has some type of control, but I meant to say have lack of control. And to be able to say that, because us as a people, I mean, we have egos and spirits too. And so we don't want to say that we don't have any control over our lives for real. You know, nobody wants to mention that. So denial feels better. You're able to cope with it better if you are denying. And it's just a coping strategy to deny. But there are many barriers, you know, to leaving. Just like in abusive relationship or intimate partner relationship, there are actual barriers. And to us, looking on the outside, if we're not in a, if we're not in a situation or relationship where it seems like somebody's, beating the other person, it says we just leave.
Right.
Just pick up your stuff and leave. But there are some barriers in that person's mind of why they can't. For example, like financial barriers.
That's right.
Okay.
Yes.
So let's just say if you have a young woman who, and what happens is the power and control starts early,
right.
but it's in ways that she can't see that the person is trying to control her. And so she thinks it's this really great love, this really protective and wonderful love, but then it starts to come through as abuse.
Right.
Maybe starts slapping. Well, let's say maybe starts breaking her phone. We were talking about that the other day. Take her phone, break her phone, stop all communication between her and her loved ones, her family, and isolated. Verbal abuse, telling her she's nothing without him. This is just an example. Psychological abuse, like if you try to leave me, you won't be able to see the children, or you won't be able to see our child. You can't take care of the child by yourself.
Right.
And the financial barriers are real. So it's like she has invested all this time and energy into this relationship, has been isolated from her family, and he's in control of all the money. He works and she stays home with the children, or, they have a joint account, or they maybe have a single account where they put all of their money into. Now he's in control of that, and you feel like if you leave, you don't have any of it because it's going to take the money. And so you don't have any way, you don't have anywhere to go. You don't have a support system anymore because they've been telling you to leave this man forever. And so they've burned bridges with you because and so how does that parallel to what we're going through?
While you were saying it, I was thinking, man, if that don't sound like me and you and just all of our people, Mama Fire, all of us, all black people here in America are suffering that same kind of fate right now. It sounds like it. I mean, I'm not proud of that at all because, like you said, we got egos and we would rather not think that that's happening to us. We'd much rather that be something on the outside. I think that might even be why when people talk about domestic violence or even domestic terrorism in the way even that we're doing it, it seems easier to talk about when you talk about something over there, or it's a thing. It's not really. I'm not in that.
It's not us.
Right. I'm not in that. I'm an analyst from the outside, kind of watching the game, but the truth is, it is us, and it has been us for 400 some years.
That's right. And so there are financial barriers, Brother Shaq, to leaving. There's not enough support for a woman who wants to leave. You were talking about her leaving and taking the children. Where does she go?
Right.
Where does she go? I was helping a young lady, 21-year-old young lady with a 10-month-old child who was leaving an abusive relationship and had nowhere to go. Right. So we went to the different places, the agencies that supposedly have resources, and all of the shelters were full.
Wow.
So what happens to a young woman where all the shelters are full? She goes back to the abuser. Right. Because that's better than sleeping on the street or sleeping in a car or sleeping, she goes back to the abuser. That's how it happens. And so if there's not enough support, then you stay. Because it's the least of all evils, right? Quote unquote, least of all evils. The man tells you he's the only one who will ever love you, and you believe him, right? So we think America is the only place, right? This is the land of the free. We, in our minds, still believing this is the land of the free.
Or that it is our country.
Our country, this is the land of the free, and that we are safe and protected here.
Right.
And that if we jump out of the frying pan, we're going to jump into the fire because we don't know where, around the world, we don't know where to go.
Right.
And so we might as well just stay here where we know we are quote unquote loved.
Right, which we know. Ain't nothing loving.
Well, it's loving like an abuser would.
Right. That's right.
Because really, the abuser doesn't want the victim to leave because he feels power and control. Right. I really understand that America does not want us to leave. That blacks doesn't make any sense because we are the servants of the country. We are the workers of the country. We're not the thinkers, y'all, and geniuses of the country. We're the workers of the country.
That's right.
Still. And the consumers, the consumers of the country. So we're feeding into the power and control for world domination, not just country domination, for world domination. So this is really thick we talking about today, Brother Shay.
Right on. I think we ought to analyze too, just quickly, whole dynamic of power and control and where that's rooted in, because we know it's rooted in fear.
Yes.
That it comes from a place of fear. But I wanted to bring it up because I'm thinking deeply about it, as you know, we have been all week, but even just right now in this moment, how we've been socialized, all of us, and in different ways, but socialized to go for power and control. Like those are sought after things, and it's never power and control over ourselves. You know, you're not never getting the as a young person coming into your own and growing. No one is telling you the virtue or value of self-mastery, of gaining power and control over yourself and your own thoughts and actions and behaviors and environment. That's not what you're actually being socialized to want to have that over somebody else, to control them. And again, it's out of fear. But I think it's part of the underpinnings of the socialization of America, that's presented to everyone as though that is the virtuous thing to do, to gain control over another, for that way, that's protection. That way they can't do it to you. Really, I mean, they came up with that whole dog eat dog thing. Like, that ain't nothing African. That ain't nothing indigenous. This whole idea that, because I'm saying, it seems as though that is rooted in competition, or this presumption that everything in every relationship, regardless of how that relationship is set up, is about power and control. Is an adversarial one. You know what I'm saying? That I have to do this to someone before they do it to me, and then nobody wants to be the victim, so everybody's trying to be the aggressor and forcing other people to submit. And again, doing that not for yourself, but to other people. And I don't really think we look at that, because I can tell you countless times in my life where I was operating from a place of fear, doing just that, trying to control the environment, the relationship, whatever the situation is, to keep myself safe. And I'm saying that because I think there's also a desire, particularly for black people or oppressed people, to want to find a place and a way that they can experience, you know, safety and not having to worry. You know, we talked about that on the show for years. Like, where do black people feel safe?
Yeah. Where
do black people feel safe? And the black people I've talked to, Mama Fi, tell me nowhere. And if they do feel any degree of safety, it's because they are momentarily in a powerful position where they have some kind of an advantage over a potential threat. That's when they feel safe. In other words, we don't feel safe just being, because we have this understanding. That's the terrorism part of it. We have this understanding that there is someone or some force trying to kill us, and we're not even sure who exactly or what it is, but we're certainly in this relationship.
And I think, you know, our people say, you know, they feel safe in church, but it's like our people were killed and murdered at gunpoint at church by the terrorizer, Dylan Roof, who was a terrorist. So I want to say the power and control piece is huge, because people think, you know, domestic violence is about love. He loves you just that much.
Right.
Or, you know, sexual abuse is about sex. Somebody just really can't control their desire to have sex. Right. This is all about power and control. And our people especially have never had, quote unquote, power and control. And so we try to exercise it over each other.
Right.
We try to exercise it and hurt, and we end up hurting and killing one another, not realizing that it takes us away from our goal, which is being safe and free. And so I just want to orientate people right now, if they're just tuning in, or if they're just coming up on Facebook Live and listen. Okay. And so just to orientate folks, we are talking about the domestic violence relationship and the cycle of abuse on two levels. We're talking about the intimate partner violence that happens between you know, people who are in relationships like girlfriend, boyfriend, wife, or husband. Then we're paralleling that to black people having the battered women syndrome.
Right.
So we're looking at domestic violence, and we're also looking at ourselves in this violent situation, in this violent relationship that we are in America.
Definitely. Right on. And that's a big thing to do, Mama Fi. I mean, what we're discussing right now don't necessarily feel good. It doesn't feel good to know that, you know, you're being abused. and that your family and before you was abused, and all of the black people that you know are also abused, and we're all in this abusive relationship, and we're having major denial. We're using denial to cope with it because it seems, insurmountable, and that it's just our lot. And I think that that's huge, because in us not really looking at it for real for what it is, it forces us into all these pseudo things that makes it appear as though we're doing something. So we find life in other things that we think we can fight, mainly each other, because we're close. We're in close proximity. So we do that. And also, I see us mimicking the same behavior as you just described.
That's right.
We mimic the same behavior. We want our rendition of white supremacy or terrorism. You know what I'm saying? We want to terrorize someone because we want to have that experience. We're the low person. We are the victim. We don't want that anymore, but we feel just incapable of removing ourselves from the situation. So we, just like in many of those domestic family type situations, Mama Fi, the person or partner who's being abused will often then turn and abuse the children. Is that not correct?
That happens. Yes, sir. Yes, it does. It's just like sexual abuse, that without it being dealt with or utilized, either sometimes someone who is sexually abused becomes the abuser, right, or they abuse themselves through sexual abuse. So, through promiscuity or, acting wild or whatever the case would be, hypersexual behavior. But yes, it's about power and control. And when you feel like you don't have any power and control, you go where you have the power. And a lot of times women will abuse children. And that's what it is. It's ugly. This whole thing is very ugly, and it's contagious, and it just grabs onto people. And at the end of the day, people who feel powerless. And so, how do we help victims of domestic violence? I just don't want to lose our time here.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. What do we do?
How do we help victims of domestic violence? A lot of the time, it's really difficult to help someone who has experienced domestic violence until they're ready. Right. Until they're really ready to change, and they know that they can, they have to do better for themselves and their children, and they make a decision to move and leave, and so part of it is shelter. Part of it is finding a place far away from the abuser. And really lose all contact and completely disconnect from the abuser. Because a lot of the time, a woman will say yes, and she'll go to a shelter in a different state and end up calling him.
Right.
End up calling him, and he says, well, how could you leave me? Right. Everything was going so well. Right. I was getting ready to get the job, and, you were going to be able to, whatever. I was getting ready to buy you a ring or whatever. And then they end up being drawn back in. Right. So it's about severing ties, and that's very difficult if you have children or whatever case may be, but severing those ties and having safe shelter. So that's one of the ways that you can help. And then getting your mind right. Because a lot of the time when you're in a domestic violence relationship, either you've had low self-esteem, or through the relationship have developed low self-esteem. And so getting your mind right to understand what is going on with you, that it's not about love here. This is about power and control. He's a controlling person, and I'm using he and she, and really that doesn't really matter.
Sure. That's how people are oriented, that it's the man who's the aggressor in that sense.
That's right. And so what do we need as a people to help ourselves as far as shelter is concerned? Or as far as disconnecting is concerned?
I mean, I think that's the big question. As you were talking about it, I was sitting here thinking about our people and why we continue to, they say the person goes back, the victim goes back
over and over again,
7 times. And so I'm hearing everything that you're saying that would be dealing with a micro domestic violence situation happening on a macro level with our people, that we continue to go back, that we're looking for the apology. We're looking for, I'm not going to do it no more. We're looking for,
the justice.
The justice. We're looking to think that, America don't really mean that. Like, there was something happened recently where this white boy who was an owner of he's an owner of some black people, the team. He
I saw that. What more do you need?
He said that you can't have the inmates running the prison when he was talking about, black people protesting. And many of our people were up in arms about what he said. But I'm always concerned when black people are surprised or tripped out by something that these people say. This sentiment has existed from the very beginning of the relationship. Them saying it doesn't make it any more real. It's been what everything has been operating on. So we just end up looking foolish and saying, man, I can't believe they said that, as opposed to somebody telling you this is who you are. They have shown you for 400 years what they think about you. And suddenly when they say something, we don't go deep enough with it, though, Mama Fire. It's just, you know what I'm saying? And that's the part that says to me that the denial is so big that there's dissonance there.
Definitely.
Because we have been shown historically what really this is. I mean, there's no question about what this is in 2017. There's no question about historically what has happened in America as it relates to so-called black people. It's all there, and history is definitely not dead. So when we are looking at this and saying, well, so-and-so shouldn't have said this, and so-and-so shouldn't have said that, and we're going to hold them accountable. Listen, I have not seen black people hold other people accountable in the same way that I see other people hold black people accountable in my life. I have never seen it happen. And I say that because of the power dynamic in the relationship. See, that's how you know the relationship ain't legitimate, because the black people don't have power in the relationship. The black people just have to take whatever abuse that comes or leave. Mm-hmm. And they got folks talking about, go back to Africa, and now they're tired of black people. Black people are a nuisance, with all this protesting and complaining and all these other things. But again, black people were only here, as far as white supremacy is concerned, to build the country and do the serving and the very lowly kinds of things. Black people were never intended to
keep the capitalism machine going.
Right. It wasn't the purpose or intention of black people to become partners, equal partners in this thing. We were dehumanized from the giddy up. So, that's why I'm saying it's. I look at it and say, well, what do you think this is, man? That's what this is, but that's what it's always been. It didn't just become it now because somebody slipped and said it. Every time somebody says something or does something very overt, like they normally do, and we know that it's becoming more and more overt, they're just showing. And what are you going to do about it? Is what they're saying. Right. Because they said it. But what are you going to do about it?
Yeah, and we don't even see the ability to do for self. That's why I got this pin on today. This is my favorite little pin that I like to wear. It says "do for self." And what does that mean? And so the power struggle between the powers that be, quote unquote, and our people, and the change and the shift of paradigm that can happen is when we ask, why do you feel like you deserve it? Because the reason why you stay. That's the reason why you say, well, it's better than anything else we got, or it's the lesser of two evils. But you feel like you deserve to have blatantly people say in your face that you ain't nothing but a prisoner. You ain't nothing but a slave. You ain't nothing but a N-word, or whatever the case may be. Y'all, there's some waking up that has to happen, as well as waking up that has to happen with the domestic violence, quote unquote, victim. Correct. So a risk assessment, and we talked about that. Right. There's a risk assessment that I share a lot with, when I do these domestic violence trainings, and shout out to Sister Midwife Productions, because part of her doula training, True Love Movement does the domestic violence training, because when women are pregnant, a lot of the time the abuse gets worse. Mm-hmm. If they're in an abusive relationship, abuse gets worse. And so I do a domestic violence training there, and we do a risk assessment. Wow. And so Brother Shaq and I are going to put a risk assessment together for the other side of this paradigm, of this parallel that is happening. But a risk assessment can help the sister get her mind right and understand that when somebody breaks your phone, that's a symbol of power and control. That's right. That's not just, he like what I was doing on Instagram. Right. This is a sign. If somebody hurts you, hurt your children, hurt your pets even, take your stuff and put it on fire, or take your stuff and throw it, and put water all over and ruin your things and ruin your computer, or these are things that's popping up in my head.
That's right.
In our minds, we say, oh, he just has a bad temper,
right.
or I really shouldn't have been on the laptop at 11:30 at night anyway. We make excuses for it.
That.
But it's a paradigm shift, because if you get a certain amount of checks, it tells you you're at high risk of being hurt or killed,
right.
In this domestic violence relationship. So we do the risk assessment as well as a safety plan. Right? Like if you're trying to leave and you can't leave tomorrow because there's some items you have to get together, or if there's, some money that you have to stack, or whatever the case may be, is making a safety plan. And so us as a people, we can surely at least start thinking, now listen, we should have been started thinking about preparing to leave.
Right.
But then also, what is your exit strategy?
Right.
And that's part of the safety plan. What is your exit strategy? Where are you leaving? What are you going to do when you leave? Where are you going? And all these things. So a risk assessment, safety plan, and exit strategy can be used for the quote-unquote victim of domestic violence and the victim of the violence that we're under.
Correct. Right on, Mama 5. We got so much popping, we didn't even give out the call-in number, Mama 5. 504-260-9265. Again, that call-in number is 504-260-9265. And shout out to our Facebook Live family who is joining us here live on the air on Facebook. We got the lines lit up just like that. We're going to take a couple of calls very, very quickly, because we got to wrap this up and tie it up real good before we get off the air. Thank you for holding. What's happening? Fantastic.
Good.
What's happening?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
No, I heard about it, but I haven't seen very much on it, dear brother. Okay. Right.
Awesome.
Tariq Nasheed. Yeah. Right. Wow. We're gonna be on the lookout. Mm-hmm. Right. Well, right on, brother. We gonna be on the lookout for that 1804. Can't wait for it, man. We gonna check it out and maybe decode it on the air, bro. We appreciate the heads up on that, and thank you for joining us as always, man. Right on.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we know about that. Oh yeah.
It's very powerful.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, definitely. Right on. We thank you for calling, brother, too, and turning us on to those movies, man. Go ahead. Thank you for holding. Welcome to the True Love Movement. What's happening, real quick? Hey, what's going on,
God bless
brother?
you, Brother Eric.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think all of our people, all black people, should know self-defense.
Definitely.
You know, period.
Yeah.
Period. Point blank.
Period. And in a domestic violence situation, though, let me say it's better to just physically leave, because a lot of women try to fight and end up hurt or killed or murdered, because of the weapons and some other factors. But yeah, self-defense is good for everybody, men, women, and children.
Right.
To know, our people to know.
Definitely. And also, I know Brother Eric, on the 29th, right, is the commemoration of the Million Women's March, correct? That's
yeah,
right.
It's tomorrow.
It's tomorrow. That's right. That's right. Yeah, we
And
did.
then there's something going on at Community Book Center as well, right?
Right
Love
on,
it,
right on,
thank
Brother
you.
Eric. Thank you. We're going to be talking about that as we get closer to that time. Before we go, Mama Fi, speaking of things that are coming up, we've got a book release.
Book release is coming up soon. Book release, book signing, and book reading is right over there at Community Book Center at 2523 Bayou Road on November 10th from 6 to 8 p.m. So I'm excited to be sharing the book, Keep It High, Thoughts in a New Light. Very proud of this work, and very proud of how it finishes up or continues on from Runaway Girl, which is my first book. And so I would love to see you all out there and supporting me, supporting True Love Movement in this big push for this information. It tells a story. It continues to tell the story, but it tells it from a different light. After my transformation, I'm in a new, more clear and understanding light of our power. The power of black people, the power of the black nation, the power of black mama, and the power of the black man and the black children. So I really am excited about sharing this with the world.
Right.
And then I just want to say, I'm going to be performing at Entertainment of the Arts.
Right, on the 3rd. Right?
Yeah, on the 3rd,
yes.
on November 3rd.
I was looking for the flyer and you were talking about it.
My sister Trinice Duplessis always is doing beautiful things, and she asked me to be a part of it, and I was honored to be a part. So it's at Cafe Istanbul on November 3rd. It starts at 7:30. There'll be food and drinks. And so y'all come on and support her. She's phenomenal. Definitely. If you're interested in the work that she's doing, she's a playwright, and she does these productions all over New Orleans and beyond.
That's right.
It's really blowing up, so y'all come on and get some of that. As well.
And that's going to be on the 3rd, right?
Yep, November 3rd, starting at 7:30. Then the book release is November 10th. And then there's a Small Business Expo happening on November the 11th.
That's right.
From Eventure Queen.
That's right.
And so if you're interested in knowing about that Small Business Expo, it's black-owned businesses. Please go on Facebook and see the Eventure, Eventure Queen, and you can look it up from there and see the details of that Small Business Expo.
That's right. And shout out to that sister. I want to say today is her birthday.
That's right. Shout out Eventure Queen.
Nzinga. That's right.
That's right, Nzinga, beautiful sister. Shout out to what's going on with the case with Ranika Shelbia, Justice for Ranika. If you want to know more information on our sister, we want to support her all the time. It's a very, heated case, and if you want to know more and how to support her, go to Justice for Ranika on Facebook.
Right on, Mama Fi.
And
so much happening here in the city of New Orleans. We are honored that you all have chosen to ride with us for this time. And we'll say, as it relates to the domestic terrorism, it's real. And I think we really have to do the uncomfortable work of accepting and looking at where we are right now, where we are, that we are in this situation. and then come out of it. Like really use our creativity to come out of it.
Black Sit.
I mean, it's a real thing. We've been talking about that since maybe a year ago, Mama Fire. This time, actually, in November, I think we started talking about Black Sit. So, share this show and others with those that you respect. Keep the conversation going, because there's so much that we didn't get a chance to get into, because it's a fast hour and it's a lot to say and do about domestic terrorism, domestic violence. But it isn't something that's happening to somebody else. We are, in fact, in a very domestic violence, domestic abusive, domestic terroristic situation as black people here in America, and we had better stop mimicking our oppressor, is what I'd say. Stop mimicking our oppressor. So, I'm Brother Shaq.
And Mama Fire.
For the True Love Movement Hour. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, True Love Movement, at TLM, at TLMHR on Twitter, True Love Movement HR SoundCloud, and the True Love Movement Hour YouTube.
Yeah, but we playing Fats Domino, Rising Power.
Rising Power, that was good ancestral Fats Domino.
Yep, local music.
Right.
Love y'all.
Y'all have a great week. See you next Saturday. Wholeness. All right. We thank y'all, family, for joining.
Yep, next up is
going to be
Say That Then.
Say That Then.
Say That Then with our brother Peter Muhammad Haroon.
That's right, WBOK family there for sure. We can dig it. Talk to your people, though, family, about domestic violence and intimate partner violence and our habits of violating one another and our failure to create safe spaces for ourselves and our people. And because that's something that we can do for ourselves, and the sooner we quit mimicking what our oppressor is doing to us through our actions, we can do our own thing, and then this idea of getting out of this relationship will seem a lot more plausible, I assure you.
And part of helping someone who is going through this very debilitating relationship that is hurting not only physically but emotionally and mentally is to support them.
Right.
Not to say you dumb, you stupid, why you with them, whatever, but to say when you are ready, we are ready to receive you. We're ready to help you. We want you to love yourself. We want you to stay healthy and strong. And I think that is parallel on the other side too. We have to support each other to leave. It's when we are out here alone like this, it's not an option, because where are we going to go and who are we going to be with and how are we going to... But if we came together and supported one another with the leaving and the pulling away, and you have to pull away mentally first. Definitely. And that's the part. When a woman is ready, she has prepared herself mentally for what's getting ready to happen. So when a victim is ready, they prepared themselves mentally. So that risk assessment, that is what we do when we are counseling people. We see where they are in their mind as far as getting their mind right and understanding their own particular power, their own personal power. A lot of us are walking around here with no personal power.
Right.
We feel like we have absolutely no power. And when you realize that you do, then things start to change and transform in your mind. Definitely. And then you wanna slowly but surely pull away. And I don't know about being slow anymore, Brother Shay.
I don't know either. I say read the button. What's the button say?
Do for self.
Read the button.
When I say do for, y'all say self.
Do for self.
Come on.
Self, come on. That's right on, Mama Fire. All right, family.
Love y'all.
Wholeness.